The contentious view of canon by studios is fresh in people's minds because of the recent release of Season 2 of Amazon's The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. In a promotional segment for the show's Season 2 finale, Amazon hosted Corey Olsen, also known as the Tolkien Professor, who stated categorically, "There's no such thing as canon in Tolkien." It should be noted that the whole point of the promo spot was to justify the decision for Rings of Power inserting the wizard Gandalf in their Second Age show, in what would be, in fans' view, another in a long line of deviations from Tolkien's established lore or canon. I've talked about why canon matters before as it relates to Star Wars and Disney Lucasfilm's current treatment of it. And I believe that in terms of Amazon's current treatment of Tolkien's Middle-earth mythology, at the heart of the issue, they share something in common when it comes to why canon matters to fans. It's important to clarify what is the current view of canon, what is the current definition, and how do fans and studios view it. One definition of canon, which I believe is the most widely accepted, is the body of works taking place in a particular fictional world that are widely considered to be official or authoritative, especially those created by the original author or developer of the world. From this, you can come to the conclusion that whatever was created by George Lucas when it comes to Star Wars, under his oversight before selling Lucasfilm to Disney, that was canon. And when it comes to J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings Legendarium, whatever came from the author himself is canon. Even if there are different ideas presented by the author, any version of those ideas would be considered canon. The view of canon among fans can also be seen as hard canon and soft canon. When it comes to Tolkien's mythology, hard canon is the Lord of the Rings trilogy and the Hobbit books and any other works published while the author was alive. All other written works published posthumously are viewed by many as soft canon. And while there is an argument to be made for that, I view all of these ideas, all of these works that were from the original author as canon, even if there are different versions or contradictions, because they are all from the original creator of the mythology. Even from Amazon's perspective, canon is exactly what they're purchasing the rights to for any production based on the original creator's lore. When it comes to different ideas from the original creator of an IP or mythology, I think it's important to note that canon is also something that can evolve. Many fans are familiar with George Lucas and the ideas that he continued to workshop, especially as he worked on the Star Wars prequel films. In those films, he introduced a massive expansion of lore, even when it came to the Force, and a controversial introduction of midichlorians. Whether fans liked that more detailed explanation about the Force, the idea of midichlorians became canon. And here's where I think it's a good comparison to J.R.R. Tolkien's mythology, because there were some ideas that the author continued to workshop. In regards to the wizards, in Unfinished Tales, Tolkien wrote that the 5 Astari, the wizards, arrived on Middle-earth in the year 1000 of the Third Age. However, later in the author's life, in the publication The Peoples of Middle-earth, the 2 blue wizards are said to have arrived around the year 1600 of the Second Age, during the time of the forging of the One Ring. Since both of these ideas are from Tolkien's mythology, both of them would be considered canon. So when it comes to Amazon's view of canon when it comes to the wizards, if the showrunners had decided to not include wizards at all in their Second Age show, that would have been viewed as in keeping with canon. The same would also have been true if they had decided to include the 2 blue wizards. Whatever version of an idea that Tolkien wrote, regardless if he had changed his mind or had further fleshed it out in his later years, fans' view of canon is any and all ideas from the original creator of that mythology. When Disney bought Lucasfilm, they had rendered the previous expanded universe works as legends, or in other words, not official canon anymore, but What they did consider to be foundational canon is the films and any and all other content that George Lucas himself created, and that would be their foundation moving forward with a new expanded universe. When it comes to books, however, there's definitely a difference in how the canon is viewed, especially when those works are adapted into other mediums. So the most widely accepted view of canon when it comes to literary IPs is the written works created by the original author. Thus, the canon is the authoritative version of those stories as written by the author. We could compare this also to Frank Herbert's Dune saga. The author himself wrote only 6 books, and most Dune fans consider that to be hard canon. The expanded works of the Dune Encyclopedia, games, comics, and the expanded universe novels by Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson are seen as soft canon. How does canon fit in regards to adaptations of these written works? The short answer is that these various adaptations are not canon. With a mythology originating from literary works, canon is solely what the author wrote. These additions to the greater IP, like the animated Hobbit and Lord of the Rings films and Peter Jackson's films, and Denis Villeneuve's most recent 2-film adaptation of Dune, all of these things are not technically canon, simply because what the author wrote is the authoritative version of those events. Each of these adaptations have taken creative liberties in adapting the author's stories to a visual medium. That's not seen as the new canon. It is simply an adaptation of canon. They are accepted by fans as meaningful additions to these authors' mythologies and legendariums because they are guided or based on what the author wrote. The debate shouldn't be centered around what is considered canon when it comes to what Tolkien wrote. Rather, the conversation should be pointed to Amazon's treatment of canon in their series. Rings of Power is in fact not an adaptation. They've touted it as being based or inspired by Tolkien's writings, but as we've seen, it is a reimagining or retelling of Tolkien's stories. If a production is not guided by canon, by what Tolkien wrote, then most fans will not accept it. The author or original creator of their ever-expanding mythology is entitled to workshop ideas to continually flesh out their detailed worlds. And the mere fact that they may change their minds in regards to certain elements doesn't justify any studio's complete dismissal of all of their ideas. What fans disagree with is the fact that Amazon is looking at those times where the author changed his mind as justification for their complete dismissal of his lore and stories. So they're in effect saying, because Tolkien changed his mind about this particular storyline, we're going to completely ignore all of what he wrote and just do our own thing with his characters and his world. And this is why fans will always fight for the integrity of any original author's creation, especially when they are no longer the stewards of it anymore. Lord of the Rings fans are possibly the largest, most passionate, and devoted. It would have been a slam dunk for Amazon to stay in keeping with what Tolkien wrote, even if there were changes made to fit to an entertaining televised format, but sincerely kept within the boundaries and spirit of what Tolkien established, then fans, old and new, would have appreciated it. So long story short, canon matters, and to fans, canon is what came from the mind of J.R.R. Tolkien.